What's up guys, it's me Jeremy. A lot of you guys might know about the crazy stuff that really happened during the alpha and beta of Hearthstone, a lot of the older cards, the older ranking systems, stuff like that. But a lot of you guys definitely don't know about the stuff that happened before even the alpha, when the devs were testing all sorts of crazy stuff and experimenting with the design for their games. So join us today in taking a look back before it's released to find out what Hearthstone could have been, with a big focus on what it could have looked like. So today we're taking a look at some pictures from the design and development process and the various versions of what Hearthstone could have been if they hadn't changed the design during the development. And if you guys enjoyed the video, definitely hit that like button, and let's begin. So first up, we're taking a look at one of the concepts for the matchmaking screen. So rather than the searching for opponent animation that we all know and love, the devs were kind of testing out like a map with some sort of animations. And as you'll see in a lot of the upcoming images, Hearthstone had a much more serious theme at this point, and actually seemed a bit more like a version of like the Elder Scrolls Legends, or maybe another card game that tries to tell a story, be very serious and gritty. And clearly Hearthstone's current business model of a more lighthearted, almost party kind of casual game theme is definitely working well for them right now, but it's definitely interesting to see the shift from what the game was originally planned on being to what it is now. Next up, we're looking at some prototypes of what were called hologram cards. So it seems like the original idea for the interface of showing minions on the board was kind of to show like the art to float around on these game pieces, giving it almost like a Duel Monsters, like kind of throwback to Yu-Gi-Oh theme almost. It's curious whether legendaries would have had different borders, whether the holograms would be scaled based on the other card's stats, what golden cards would have looked like with these, but still this type of model seems actually fairly inconvenient as far as like an actual interface goes, with seeing stats and card text at a quick glance, stuff like that, which is probably what led the devs to arrive at their current board style and arrangement. Another early prototype of what the board and cards could have looked like, this one is described as testing 3D cards. So this interface looks actually incredibly confusing. It's very hard to tell what's going on here, but this kind of super complicated board system is something the devs definitely experimented with a lot, something they decided to try out. Again, we're kind of seeing like a huge transformation from like serious, complicated card game to like the more casual and fun version of Hearthstone that we know today. Likely because Blizzard's marketing research definitely indicated that people wanted a game that was a lot more casual to get into, a little bit easier to play and stuff like that, but overall it's really cool to see the design of the game originally. Next up, we're taking a look at some kind of like adventure map that you sort of like maybe battled your way through. It kind of reminds us a little bit of like how adventures work in Hearthstone. Like imagine the adventures were set up in a way like this, where you kind of like adventure through a map, although it was definitely a different way of formatting than the adventures are in the game today. And this kind of map actually does look pretty cool, definitely seems like a really cool idea. I guess the devs scrapped it for the sake of simplicity, maybe they just recycled it into the concept of adventures that we have today. You can also see on this map that there's like an auction house, like a store as well, so it's a little bit curious to see which of these was kind of like the store we have today and what the other one actually did. Maybe this was a design for the actual in-game menu, or like the menu screen at the start of the game once you launch it. Either way though, next up we're taking a look at a little bit more of an advanced quest system, one of the original designs for the quest system with a little bit more story to it, a little bit more development, rather than kind of just like the number goals we have now, win 5 games with X class, etc. Again, this kind of reminds us a little bit to a more like RPG focused. Elder Scrolls Legends is potentially the best comparison to an already existing card game, where kind of like the actual card game is ported into more of like a fantasy RPG progression of events kind of thing, rather than Hearthstone, where the main attraction is the actual card game itself and not really much else. Once again though, we do see the theme of shifting towards simplicity and sleekness rather than a more serious and complex storyline. It's a little bit interesting to talk about whether Hearthstone would have been a better game if the game had had more complexity to it, but the casual focus that Hearthstone decided to go to definitely made it a lot easier for newer players for sure. And here we can see sort of the initial idea for the actual game board. It seems like it's a little bit going off of the WoW TCG, although the board isn't necessarily developed as yet, and the cards and interface in general are just a lot different. Playing on a stump with some flowers in the background was actually potentially one of the precursors to some of the cool interactive game boards that we have today. Maybe that's where the idea came from, or at least inspired it. And we can also see at some point that there were plans for the innkeeper to actually have his physical hands in the image and kind of like moving the cards around, something that's pretty cool, but obviously would definitely look super weird in the version of Hearthstone that we have today. And here we can see another early version of the quests menu, and kind of like the style of like a book, since at this point they were still going for a little bit more of like an immersive, in-depth, complex, almost RPG-like feel. There's also some really cool stats on the side, like most damage done in one turn, that could potentially be really cool to have in Hearthstone today. In addition, you can also see that the quests are still a lot more story-based, rather than kind of just like do this thing, and you can actually kind of like initiate the quest from the menu rather than just being a passive thing that you automatically get that you just complete in the play mode, something like that. Next up, we're taking a look at a map from the Warcraft universe where people could potentially go into battle. It's interesting if each point had maybe different kinds of CPUs to play against, or maybe different ranks of players, but overall this sort of like RPG focus is definitely a really cool idea. I mean, the Legend players could have like the continent of Northern to themselves and only be able to play on those maps or something like that. A lot of these concepts seem really cool and like they would maybe even be pretty popular if some version was implemented now. But at the time, the more complex the interface was, the more difficult it would have been for Blizzard to build the player base, the viewership, and just the game in general at the start. So it's a little bit interesting, definitely very interesting, to see kind of the directions, the decisions that Blizzard made in the development, and really just some of the angles that Hearthstone could have been. Next up, we can see an early version of the game menu still in development. There's only a couple interesting things in this one. First off, it's interesting to see that in this point, they kind of still planned for the main title of the game to just be Warcraft Legends, rather than Hearthstone. Secondly, there also does not seem to be a ranked option, although it's possible that the tournament mode is ranked rather than an actual tournament mode, since we don't really have a way to do incline tournaments. Lastly as well, we can also see the blue ribbon, the wood in the background, which kind of ended up sticking around for the current version of the game, and now as we go through these, we can start to see things that look a little bit more like the Hearthstone we know now. Now, especially here with this version of the menu, we're starting to see something that looks a little bit closer to what we actually have in the game now. Here we can see the menu kind of used to be like books or spell books rather than like actual buttons. Presumably the books, you click on it, it opens up and it adds like a pretty cool animation or like an interesting transition. As far as the menus go, we can also see that the game already had its logos, but the name Warcraft Legends, which is likely what they planned on calling it until they chose to eventually go with the name of Hearthstone Heroes of Warcraft. Next up, we're looking at one of the earliest versions of the actual game itself being played, and it's really starting to look a lot more like the Hearthstone we know and love, albeit a lot more unrefined, a lot less polished. Additionally, the hero portraits seem to have been on the left of the screen instead of the bottom and top, something that seems a little bit unintuitive, kind of confusing and almost inconvenient. Definitely a good decision that they changed that one for sure. And next up, it's something that was apparently the art that was going to be used for acidic swamp ooze in the alpha. I mean, it's definitely a good idea that they actually got some really solid art put together, but who knows, imagine if we were playing Hearthstone where all the cards kind of look like this. Either way though, those were just some of the, early images that we have of the development process. As far as visuals go, what would you guys have wanted Hearthstone to look like? I mean, I'm definitely fond of the way that it looks now, but it definitely could have also been a lot different. So hopefully you guys enjoyed this journey through the development of Hearthstone. Definitely let us know in the comments below what your favorite thing was, and either way, looks like that's gonna be it for me. If you guys enjoyed the video, drop a like, subscribe if you want. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys next time.